President Chandrika Bandaranaike. Welcome to the Advocata conversation.
Thank you.
Just to give context of why we are having this conversation, most of Advocata's audience are younger people between the ages of 16 and 35. And your presidency ran from 1995 to something like 2005. 94 to 2005. And many of that audience may not have been born, or they may have not been in adulthood to recollect the kind of economic policies and economic reform that was done during your time. And Advocata is primarily an economic policy think tank, and I thought that it was an opportune time to have this conversation. So for the benefit of the audience, can you tell us a little bit about your story, about your childhood, about your education, your family life? Of course, we know that your father was former prime minister, your mother was, but what's your story?
It's a long one, but I'm not going to spend a lot of time on it because we can't go on and on. Usually, I don't talk about my childhood because it's so checkered and so long, so much to say. But if I try to be brief, I haven't thought about how to be brief, but yes, my parents were in politics from the time, my father was in politics from the time we were born, because he was a minister in the British Legislative Council also. By the way, I was born across the road here.
Okay.
In a house belonging to Lionel Went, which my parents had first rented when they married, and then my grandfather bought intentional for them. Anyway, all my childhood memories from the beginning is of my father doing politics, people coming to the house, discussions, dialogues and all that kind of thing. My mother attending on them, but she also was in social service in the Mahila Samiti and so on. But all our basics were looked after well, and I just skip many things, but it was a calm and nice childhood. We had all kinds of extracurricular activities, not a lot like now. But I must also tell you that our parents, I don't know whether they discussed and came to this decision, but they did certain things. They didn't sit us down and lecture to us. You must do this and you must do that. But by watching the way they lived, I learned a lot. I'm speaking for myself now, and I'm sure my siblings also. For example, we had, my sister and I mean, that was not the modern age where girls whose parents had some means had 1001 dresses. You know, every year we had 2 dresses, maximum 3, for party dresses. We were never given more. And we were told just repeat it and wear it. And we were not allowed to go everywhere. My mother and father were very strict about it, especially my mother, because she was very strictly brought up in a village area in the hills in Ratnapura. So that's one night that I remember, and I'm very happy about it. We used to be given rupees 350 pocket money per week, and everything we wanted we had to buy from that. And we were encouraged not to buy sweets and this and that, and at that time we didn't have all these various types of rubbish food. Even if you wanted to buy them, once in a way we had a chocolate that somebody would have brought in a box. But my father used to always say, now go and buy books. And we used to go and buy books, and he used to always look at the books we bought.
So did you have a tradition in your house of reading?
Yes.
And what did you read?
My father read a lot, and his educational background, and he loved reading. And the one memory I have of him is he liked to have he looked after his health very well. As many of his doctors said, if he was not shot dead, he would have lived up to a good 100 years like most of the Bandaranaikas, and been very well. You know, they didn't have all these NCDs and all these things. And he used to play tennis till after he became Prime Minister. He hardly had the time. But every morning he would do 1 to 1.5 hours of yoga and exercise. Even the day he was shot dead in the front veranda of our house, he had finished his exercise and come down. So he was very conscious of, keeping fit. So
So, what was the dinner table conversation like? I mean, what were you all discussing, and what was his vision for Sri Lanka, or then Ceylon?
before that, I will finish what I was going to say. I went into
Right.
unnecessary details. You can read that. One memory I have is my father used to have an afternoon nap, part of
Right.
his health thing, I think, if he had the time, just 15-20 minutes sometimes. And we used to find him, we used to go even for that 15 minutes to bed with a book. And we used to find him fast asleep with a book on his stomach, open like that. So, this was the kind of culture we had. And my sister and I we were older than my brother, we used to just delve into his books on the shelves.
So, what did he read?
Oh, very serious things. And he must have been reading political things also. By the time I was 11, I was beginning to read Tolstoy and Pushkin. And I didn't understand any of it. But we were reading it, so we must have absorbed something. But we also read Enid Blyton and Dennis Robbins. There was a sort of romantic stories. But I got very bored with those romantic stories. So that's the kind of thing. Shakespeare, of course. We did Shakespeare at school also. So dinner table conversations, my father, at least half the week, he would have dinner with us. And my brother was too young. He was given dinner and sent off to bed. But my sister and I and the parents, they would be discussing politics. And I used to avidly listen and sometimes pipe in also. But I was never told, just shut your mouth, you have nothing to do with this. My father would engage with me. And sometimes my mother would say, that's not your business. My father said, no, come on. Yes, say that. What did you say? Well done and all that. So, and his last dinner at home, he was shot the next morning. Finally, I was the only person who was at the table with him. Because my mother had dinner and rushed off to some Kovil to do a puja because the astrologers had told her his time was not good. And my sister had dinner with us and went off upstairs because she was also avid reader, must have been to read or something. And I sat there and I was eating slowly and must have been in my dreams, and my father started talking with me. And I was angry with him because they were going to New York in 2 days' time, 2 or 3 days' time, and for the UN, UNGA, and we wanted to go. We had never been abroad.
Okay.
We had never been abroad till my father died. Because at
that age, what was your age?
I was 14 when he was killed.
Oh, okay.
But we were never taken. In the sense, very few people went abroad at the time, Murtaza. And we could have gone, government could have. My mother and father refused to let the government pay for us. Whenever we went with her, I'll tell you another story about that anyway. So that was the last. And he said he knew I was angry. So he said, you are angry that we are not taking you. He said, I don't have the money to take you this time, but next time I'll do that. And I sort of didn't answer and showed that I was angry. next morning he was gone. And about traveling, these are just little anecdotes. The first time we went abroad was just as I finished my O-levels at age 15. I was underage for my class, always precocious. So, and my sister had finished her A-level. She was just 2 years older to me, still is. And my mother had just assumed the premiership, and Prime Minister Jawaharlal Nehru invited us to India. He was quite friendly, very friendly with my father. They had been fighting for Indian Sri Lankan independence even when my father was at Oxford and he was at Cambridge, but he had left Cambridge, but he was in some movement. And they knew each other when they were in power, and he was very sad about what happened, and he wanted to just sort of, I think, be nice to my mother. So he invited her on a private visit to India just as we finished the exams. And he said, bring all 3 children. So my mother has told the Indian High Commissioner or whoever, no, I can't, because I can't afford to pay for all 3 children. I'll bring one. Then you know what Pandit Nehru did? He sent his private plane.
Oh, did he?
To Colombo to take all of us. So that was my first trip to India. And we went and stayed with them in Delhi at Teen Murti. And every morning we used to have breakfast with the family. And that was a gorgeous experience. And we could see him. Every morning he would go and sit on the steps of Teen Murti. And people could come with their petitions and talk to him. Then only he would go to office and do the formal things.
So, what was your father's economic philosophy? Did he ever discuss? when I asked you about his vision for Sri Lanka, but it could have had a development angle. What did he believe in terms of economic ideology?
I must tell you, I was too young to discuss economics with him, and at that point I didn't care about it. I don't know, he was not an economist, he was a classics scholar and a great Democrat. So I think he wanted the people of Sri Lanka to enjoy the fruits of independence in every way, and he was very much for minority rights till 1955.
Okay.
They came into power in 56. In Parliament, there in Hansard's it is recorded, where he always fought for parity of, the Tamil demand was parity of status for languages. They didn't ask for Elam and separate states and all. And he always spoke about it. The one leader who opposed it right through, I have speeches, Hansard's from 45, was Jafferjee. He always spoke of Sinhala only. So then, obviously, unfortunately, my father was forced into accepting Sinhala only as a slogan for the elections, to win the elections, because they brought in all kinds of riffraff into the coalition in order to win against a very powerful UNP. But soon after, what is interesting is that he signed the Bandaranaike Pact. And he was going to implement it 1 year later when all these Buddhist monks started walking on the roads, encouraged by Jayarajawadana. Radhasenaka minded his business and he didn't get involved. He was the leader of the UNP. But JR was the power behind the throne. And then finally, what happened, the rest of it I don't need to repeat. So I think his main point was actually give the fruits of independence to the people, to our people. Sinhala only was also a way of giving an identity and thereby empowering the majority of the people. At that time, 75% of the population was Sinhalese. So, but soon after, because the Tamil and Muslim people had to get their rights, he brought in the VC Pact. But that was not to be. Economics, I think, obviously being very intelligent, he was for socialist economics. He certainly wasn't a Marxist.
And that was in vogue at that time.
Very much in vogue, and many countries in the world were following it. The government owning major economic enterprises and all that, and then doling out to the people.
Because when your father was at Oxford, this Fabianism movement would have been
very active.
Very active, right? So that would have probably shaped him.
Yes, he read a lot, so he would have read all these things. And also he believed that his time, he only was Prime Minister for 3 years, 3.5. His time was spent in nationalizing and the state taking over foreign assets. Well, Sri Lankan assets that the foreigners had grabbed. So, that was the phase. So, to sort of start new structures of the economy, like open market economy and all, there was no time. And the open market wasn't at all known in the whole third world. And at that time, 150 out of 200 countries were in the third world. So, but, starting the People's Bank, the Paddy Lands Act, giving paddy back to, the paddy lands back to the farmers.
Maybe even the EPF, right, was set
EPF
up
was started
during his term.
Workers' rights.
Yeah.
So he was more interested in giving the people their basic rights, which they didn't have.
So you go to St. Bridget's Convent, and then what happens after that? Then you go to university, and you go to the Sorbonne.
Yes.
And what did you study?
Political science and economics.
Right.
I did my degree in political science.
Right.
At the School of Political Science. The French system is very different. The more elitist, sorry to say that, and top level subjects were called, they were in the faculties were called colleges. It wasn't a political science. There was no other political science faculty. The political science college was in Paris, part of the University of Paris. But it was a private college which was started during the time of Napoleon Bonaparte to train children of the elite into administration and politics. Even now, almost every single president and prime minister of France has gone through that college. And then you do other things. The French are very good at doing 3-4 degrees at the same time. They do economics, law.
So you did economics?
I did economics as a side subject, but from a PhD which I started after the degree, it was development economics.
Right. And where was that?
at a part of the University of Paris, which is called the École Pratique des Hautes Études. Once again, another college, the highest college of the practical college of higher studies. But it's not practical. People do their PhDs there now more and more. I nearly finished. I did about 75% of it.
Right. And what were you researching?
Strange things. The socio-economic structures of ancient Iran, that is from the time of the kings, and its transformation during colonialism into commercial capitalism.
Okay. So
into commercial capitalist structures. So it's not only economics, it's also social.
Majority of people in that generation who had the means probably would have gone to the UK, some maybe to the United States. Why did you go to France?
Because I was a rebel.
Did you know French in school? You had
I did French. My strongest subjects were languages.
Right.
I did Latin, French, English. I used to get the prizes for all those subjects. Sinhalese, English, to be equally good is rather rare, but I was. And so was my sister, because our parents insisted on speaking to us in Sinhalese at home. But we came from an English background and we read all these books and all that. And we were in the Sinhala stream at school. That was the Kannangara reforms. But we had the English background. We heard the parents speaking English and blah, blah. But why I chose Paris is another interesting story. Because I was the rebel in the family. I used to be punished eternally at school. If I didn't get punished a few times every month, I was not happy. And I used to be called up on the platform, escorted by the nuns. It was a Catholic school run by Irish nuns. So you can't get anything more conservative and narrow-minded. So I wanted to always stir up the pot. And I did science for my O-levels. And I did science for my A-levels too. I wanted to become a doctor. But at that time, there was only one medical college in the country. And that year, I still remember, they took only 113 students. I missed the entrance by about 5 marks because I didn't study. That was just after my father died and my mother had come into politics. And rather than studying, I would go and eavesdrop into the political conversations in the home. And sometimes even participate by force. So I hadn't studied. Anyway, whatever the reason, I didn't get enough marks. And all my other friends did it a second and sometimes third time. So most of my classmates are doctors. I said, I'm not going to do it again. I felt insulted that I failed. I had not failed an exam before that. So I switched to law and went to Aquinas to do the law degree. I did my first in laws. Just at the end, but in the meantime, I had done French in school. Latin I did, but that's a dead language, as you know. And while waiting for results, those days A-level results took about 1 year to be given.
Wow.
So while hanging around, and we were not allowed to go to nightclubs and things, with a group of girlfriends, I went to the Alliance. Sorry, my throat is bad. To the Alliance Française. And 2 years I did spoken French. Then while I was there, I was told by the tutor that the French government was that year going to give scholarships for undergraduates. Until then, a lot of countries gave scholarships to Sri Lanka because we had only 1 or 2 universities and our students didn't have many chances of doing the university degree. Russia gave about 150 at the time. Then some of the Soviet bloc countries gave a whole lot. And England was very stingy about giving scholarships. But France gave, Germany gave, Eastern and Western and like that. So the French were giving a few for postgraduate studies, masters and PhDs. But that year they decided to give for undergraduate studies. Only one scholar. And I was told this. I applied. My mother was the leader of the opposition, so she had no way of influencing. And we were interviewed by the, it was handled by the Education Ministry and the French Embassy. A group of those 2 institutions interviewed us. About 100 students applied. I got the scholarship because I had got a fairly good credit in the A-levels, in the Sri Lankan A-levels and the London A-levels in French, and I could speak a little bit and all that, so I got it. But my decision to go to France and not to England is because having switched from science to arts, I did history also as a subject for the London A-levels, and also Sri Lankan A-levels. But the London A-levels at that time, as the special subject for history, you always had to do a special, had the French Revolution. So I chose, they had several specials, I chose that. And then I read whatever was available in Colombo on the French Revolution, in addition to the one textbook. And I was very much enamored by this whole revolution, the people rising up against absolute power of the monarchy and all that. And I was always against monarchy and elites. Huh? That was my father's influence, I think. So I thought these people must be great fun. So I must go there. And I never looked back, nor did I regret. And I found then in between, I went once to after India, after we were invited by Jawaharlal Nehru, as I said. 4 years later, I accompanied my mother to the Commonwealth Conference in London. I loved all the museums and all those things. But I thought the British people were staid and stolid. So I thought these people will be much more interesting, and I liked it. So that's how I chose it. And I was hugely rewarded for that, because 9 months after I went to university there, there was the famous 1968 student rebellion. You must have heard about it. That was the most powerful, largest student rebellion in the world. I think after the Russian revolutions and that revolutionary period. So the barricades, where they put up barricades against the police, I was on the barricades.
Okay. So this echoes the visualization of Les Miserables. I mean, the barricades and the protesters and the military coming.
The French are very, very good at that.
Right. So you're in France, then you do your PhD, and then you say...
No, I didn't. I didn't finish it.
You didn't finish it?
I did 75% of it. Yes. I came back to Sri Lanka.
And what prompted you to come back?
To do my research, because it was on Sri Lanka.
Right, okay.
For 1 year, I sort of asked for vacation from the scholarship for 1 year. I was going to be at home, I didn't need their money, and I was going back for a year. I was dragged into the Land Reforms Commission by Minister Hector Kobbakaduwa.
This is in the early 70s?
72. I came back in 72 and never went back.
So the Land Reform Commission, I'm sure that lots of people have thrown brickbats at you.
Those are the landowners, not the others.
Landowners. So what was the intention of the Land Reform Commission? Is it that the landed gentile in Sri Lanka owned a lot of the land?
Yes. Right. And foreign companies. I had nothing to do with the conceptualization of the land reforms. I was still in Paris.
Right.
I came back just after the law was passed. But don't forget, there were the leftist parties in government.
So we know now that the government owns something like 83 or 84% of all the land in Sri Lanka.
Still.
Now, yes, now.
Because they
don't occupy, but they own. At that time, what was it? Do you remember?
Well, we took over about 1 million acres of land owned by Sri Lankan landowners, and over 1 million acres of foreign owned plantation land.
So it's 2 million. Just to give the context.
2 point something million.
Sri Lanka's landmass is about 16.3 million acres. So about 2 million acres.
2 to 2.5.
And that would have been fairly productive land. Right.
It was, obviously, because it was all in the form of plantations.
Right.
And we lost all our assets.
Right.
And that, I think I must say this year, I'm normally rather modest. Even foreign leaders have told me, probably my mother is the only leader in the world who gave up the only assets that she and her family had for the sake of the government and the country. The land reform was prompted after the 1971 insurrection of the JVP. Because you see, the LSSP, the Communist Party, and all were in government, in my mother's government, and they had understood it as that it was partially true, well, mainly true, that the poor, educated young people, at that time 72 point something % of the population were rural, that they were educated but they had no jobs because the economy was very, very poor. So this was a jobless, educated youth who did the revolution. But of course, there was a terrorist murderer like Rohana Vijayveera who jumped in there and became the leader. But he was followed by all these, innocent young children who thought they could change the whole system, regime change for the for the better of the country and themselves. So they understood this and they said we have to give them some assets. We can't give them all jobs because the government is poor. And they looked around and realized that the assets were with the rich Sri Lankans and the company. So they took them over and distributed them to the people.
So you were in the Land Reform Commission for how long?
5 years.
5 years.
Till the change of government. And what we did there, once again, I like to create, about BALP and all these other things I do. And they were just taking this over. They were going to create various corporations of government for the government to run a lot of it and the rest to be distributed to the people. And that was beginning. Then I said, no, I want to do something more creative for the young people. Can you give me, if you want me to work there, Kobakadu dragged me there. He shouted at me. I said, no. And that's another story. And I said, okay, I'll do it for 3 years, but I must be given the freedom to take some of this land and create some new venture for the young people. So I said, okay, you tell us what you want to do. So I went in there and got the job and looked at it, and we created this thing which was a form of cooperative farms where educated young people, O-level, A-level, we had about 10, 15 graduates also in it. They owned the land through the cooperative society. There was a special act that was brought to Parliament, and we formed cooperative societies for these things that were called Janavasa. Janavasa is people's habitation, and they were trained to manage their own, to do the cultivation. They were the farmers, they tilled the land, they managed it, they did their own accounts, and so on. And this was going on, and this was very, very successful. As usual, I got the country's top experts into a committee to help me. Agriculturists, soil scientists, professors who were so happy, and strangely all of them were Marxists at the time. So they were very happy that I was trying to put into action what they thought should happen. And they used to come with me, spend whole days on these farms, training the young people. And we had 275 units with 30,000 young people working in them.
Has any of the most successful cooperatives survived today?
Unfortunately not, because as soon as J.R. Jayawardena came in, his MPs barged into the cooperative farms, hit and chased the young people. We had even built houses for them. I mean, we didn't build, they built it themselves. The housing block was owned by them. We gave them the deeds separately. So that was their own land. I have gone and even built houses with them. Matigahano abysses with them for these houses, cooked and eaten with them and all that. So they were thrilled, and they chased them all out. In some places where they refused to go and dug their heels in, they sent the army in to chase them out. And quite a lot of those lands, the MPs, the UNP MPs assigned to themselves.
So going back to that era, I believe in 71 or 72, there was a new constitution.
72.
72.
The Republican Constitution.
Now, besides the politics and why we needed to be a republic, one crucial element of that constitution, which is related to economic governance, was the independence of the civil service was changed. That secretaries would be appointed by the cabinet. Subsequently, in the 1978 constitution, was that it would have been appointed by the president. I mean, lots of commentators say that that was a big mistake.
I agree.
Do you remember why they did it?
I don't know. I wasn't here when that constitution came. I told you I came end of 72.
70. But this was early part of 72.
The constitution came in July.
July.
I came back in August, and I didn't get into the debate of it, but I think it was wrong. But don't forget that the constitution was done by Dr. Colina de Silva. They were people who believed in governments directing everything.
In fact, some other actor from that era actually told me is that they believed in socialism.
Yes,
and they felt that the civil service, which was an elite, would stand in the way.
The civil service in some places was standing in the way. And don't forget, civil servants got together with the police and a few army leaders and tried to topple my mother's government in 1971. No, sorry, in
That was
62.
a coup, right?
In 62, a coup d'etat.
Coup
Her first government,
Right.
2 years after it came in.
Right,
And the plan was to kill her and all that.
right.
But so the civil service at the time was very elitist.
Mhm.
All the top elite people, families, children went into civil service.
Mhm.
And the best husband that parents could find for their daughters was a civil servant. So they were quietly, not not openly, but they were quietly sabotaging various things. I don't know the details because I wasn't in government then and I haven't studied that. I have heard it being said. So that would have been why. And anyway, the Marxist parties who were in power were very dirigist,
Mhm.
controlling. So they wanted to control the public service, which is not right. But what would have been the solution, I don't know.
So during that era, ideologically, I was told you were left of center, that you had a certain.
I still
So
am.
what was your belief at that time?
Well, democratic socialism.
Right,
I believed in democracy passionately,
right.
not this Stalinist kind of governments, or Trump kind of governments, where the people have total freedom and fundamental rights and all that, but where the elite will not own the entire economy, where the people, the masses, will also have a right to the economy, will also have a right to participate in governance, and so on. This is why when I first came in, now I'm jumping, otherwise it will take a long time, I believe very much in socialist economy, but not the Stalinist kind of economy or the Chinese type of economy. Democratic social, more like the Socialist Party in France. But there we believed in the state owning industries and all that, and state controlling the industries and then giving handouts to the people kind of thing. I can remember, I'll give you one example, I can give you many. After my husband was assassinated by the JVP and I had to run away because the JVP kept sending me letters saying, if you remain in Sri Lanka, we will kill you and the 2 children also. So I was made to run away in the dark of the night one day by my family, and I was hanging around there looking after my children, and Mr. Ronnie DeMille had also left the government because he didn't get on with President Privatization. And he was living in London. I knew him because he had served in my mother's government also.
He was the General Secretary of the SLFP.
General Secretary of the SLFP, whether he was a deputy minister, he was a deputy minister in one of our cabinets, in one of our later cabinets. So I knew them well. So he would invite me for lunch and take me to posh places that I couldn't afford for lunch, and have long chats, and I enjoyed having. He was a very, very, very clever man. And at the end of it, his main goal was always to persuade me that the socialist economy will not work in Sri Lanka, it is a capital. So I used to say, no, but I mean, you stay with your ideas, I'll stay with mine, don't try to force me. Then he would say, no. And one fine day he said, Chandrika, one fine day you are going to lead Sri Lanka. And you have to get these ideas right, get these ideas straight. So I said, who told you that? People are beginning to say that, but I said I will never do that because I was convinced I didn't want it. I was dragged in screaming and kicking finally. And then anyway, I had a lot of discussions with him. I didn't sort of refuse to discuss. And when I came back to Sri Lanka, I had already looked at the free market economy. The free market economy was taking over the world. The socialist economies had failed. And I began to study that even further. My professor for my development economics, my doctorate, he was also a Marxist. He was a development economist, but very, very liberal Marxist, not Marxist politically, but economically. But he was also moving towards a free market economy, and he used to talk to us and lecture to us and all that. So then I began to look at this, and I realized that the free market economy had more positives than the other one.
So Ronnie DeMille influenced you. Anybody else? Anybody else you met? Or, I mean, even the world was changing, right, during that era.
Well, we used to always have, this is a sort of leftist habit.
Right.
We used to have groups of young people, my friends and some of my relations also. We used to get together and have regular dialogues, discussion groups. Quite a few, even Nimal Sandaratna was in that, in one of our groups. And he wasn't there for a long time. We had highly educated economists, sociologists, anthropologists like Chandrika Bandaranaike and all that. So we were all sort of like having doubts. A few were hard Marxists, but the others, so we used to discuss a lot. And I used to read.
Even Nimal Sandaratna once, when I asked him this question, he says, no, we believed in socialism in that era. Of course, then
Exactly, so I can say the same thing. And when the eras changed, I was trying to be stubborn because I've been loyal to my beliefs. And then suddenly I began to realize, don't be so stupid, things are moving in a different direction. I studied, then I started studying what was happening, and I realized that.
So when did you move to the UK?
Well, I went to France in 1967 for my studies, came back in 72. Then I had to run away in I had to run away in 88 after Vijay was assassinated.
And you were based in
London.
London. So Maggie Thatcher had come in
She was
79.
there. And while I was there, she was chased away by her party.
Right. But there was a lot of reform, that free market movement in the UK.
I was studying that also.
Yeah. So that would have rubbed off on you, right? Because UK...
And also, Murtaza, my professors were all left socialists or Marxists in Paris.
Right.
And I used to hop across to Paris all the time.
Right.
From London. Even now when I go, I always go there. So I would have long chats with them, and I love dialogues and all that. And even they were moving towards, they were sort of reluctantly moving towards the free market economy. So I had a lot of dialogue like that.
So you come back into politics around about 1993? You become chief minister?
I came back in 91.
91.
I was in London with my 3 children. They were going to school there, and they were and from the SLFP, various groups, and from the Vijay's party, the SLMP was a breakaway from the SLFP, isn't it? So they were all already at heart SLFP, and that SLMP was in pieces after I left and Vijay disappeared. Anyway, so groups of them used to send the hat round. They didn't have money for tickets, collect money and come to London and say, madam, please come back, there's no leader and all that, and I used to chase them away. I don't want to come back into politics, I'll just help you all and all that. Then finally the situation became so bad when the third group came and told me, come. I said, I'll come back, because they said there is no other leader, and at that time I was very committed to the country. And I wanted to help the country, from outside, like the land reforms thing and all that. That was politics that I was doing, but not, contest and come into parliament. So I said, okay, I'll come and see if there are no leaders. And I came for 1 month, leaving my children with friends. And they were terrified even at that time. Both of them were witness to their father getting murdered. And they were crying and saying, don't go, they kill you when you get to Sri Lanka and all that. So I lied to them and said I was going for a conference to some other country, and I came for a month, and I realized there was no one. And my mother was getting various people to talk to me. She talked to me saying, your brother just cannot do it, he has gone off the mark, and you have to take over your father's and mother's party and all that. I said, I don't care about that, but if we can do something for the country, I'll think about it. So then I went there, and I did a lot of thinking on my own, and through a lot of tears. I used to think, and my children would say, don't go, and I knew it was bad for them. And finally I thought, okay, I'll go and see. So I came back in January 91. I went in 88 and came back in 91.
And then you become the chief minister of the Western Province.
In 93.
93. And then you run for the presidency and you win in 1994, ending...
1.5 years later.
Yeah, 17 years of UNP government. So what, from an economic perspective, we know about the LTT issues, which was the burning issue, but what were the economic issues you were confronted with? Do you remember?
Of course. At that time, the economy was doing quite well. Under the Jaya Jayawardena system had continued for 17 years. President Premadasa, I don't think, dismantled it, but he was taking some of the goodies and giving it to the people, which was also a good thing in my opinion. And I came in saying, I was feeling very guilty that I had moved from socialism to towards capitalism, the free market economy. So I coined something called capitalism with a human face. I said, we are going to establish capitalism with a human face. The positives of capitalism and the negatives we will put aside, and we will take some of the profits and distribute to the poor people, distribute in different ways. So the economy was was fairly stable, but inflation was at about, if I remember right, I didn't look it up today, was at about 13%. And actually, Ranil Wickremesinghe was running the economy the last 3 years before I came in, because he was Deputy Minister of Finance, and Mr. D.B. Wijayatunga, the president, didn't know a bean about economics, so he had left Ranil to do it all. There were some issues, like for example, they had privatized 39 state-owned enterprises, not the big ones, small factories, small, all of them started during my mother's time, all gifts from the socialist world. The 4 or 5 textile factories, Pugoda, Tulhiriya, Veyangoda and all that, the hardware corporation, the steel corporation, and so on and so forth, 39. Ceramics, three ceramics corporations. But I don't know whether you know this, you would have been a small boy. They privatized it not at all transparently, and the people who got it were, for example, the steel corporation was given to a man who was selling rice packets to the port workers, and such people who could not run this. And by the time I came in, 3 or 4 years later, we came in, all those factories, some had closed down completely, others were just struggling and wanting to sell off or give it back to the government. That is when we took those 39, and I had them all investigated. I have the files, and if I did what this government is doing, Ranil Wickremesinghe would have been in jail many times over, because he led it. But I said my policy, this is also important, is not to harass the opposition, because as I said, as I came in, I said the country is wounded. The country is divided between the Sinhalese and the Tamil people, the Tamils and the Muslims. Within parties, Jaya Jayawarden had split his own party into 3 or 4 groups in order for him to remain in power. So I said, and he split our party into 2, between brother and sister. So I said, my job, I think, is to heal the wounds of our society and bring the country together as one united country. And I kept on saying that in all my speeches. So I said, I am not going to punish the opposition. If they have done something wrong, we started investigation, and some things were proved. I'm not going to say that again, because these people are trying to find out, and I have the evidence. In one case, the main witness was killed, just as the case was filed in courts. Then we would have had to arrest the main culprit, who was a political leader. And I said, no, this is a main leader of the opposition, and it will look very bad that I come in suddenly trying to heal the nation and then start arresting and putting people in jail. Let them be, let us go ahead. But those people didn't realize it, and they sabotaged everything I tried to do in government.
So when you become the president, you would have had to craft an economic team. So who were the principal actors in your economic team?
Yes, now that was very important, because my cabinet and the deputy ministers, I had nobody who had experience except 3. Experience of government or managing anything. I wasn't in government. I had been chief minister and prime minister for at least 1.5 years, and I had managed various things, institutions like the Land Reform Commission and all this. My mother, Lakshman Jayakodi, who was not a very clever economist or anything, and Ratnasri Vikramanayaka was a clever man who had been in my mother's cabinet before. Everybody else were absolute starters, and they didn't have a clue. And I didn't have highly educated people. Certainly I had some graduates who had better degrees and who were cleverer than some of the people in the government now, but they were few. So I knew I had to get the experts around me. I actually invited, I started a system where I invited loads of experts from the private sector and from the universities to come for discussions with the president's office. And I said, would you like to help the government? They all said yes, most of them. And we separated them out into different groups, economy, education, this and that. And I got their help. Now, for the economy, I had what I call the Expert Advisory Committee on the Economy. And it grew from 2-3 people. You want to know the names?
Some of them. Yeah.
I had Dr. Lal Jayawarden, who was a very, very clever, able economist. Mr. S. Jayawarden, who was in the central bank, about to become the governor, I persuaded him under duress to take over the finance ministry as the secretary, because I made myself the finance minister because I knew nobody in my cabinet could have done it.
It's told that A.S. Jabardana was with you in the Land Reform Commission. Was he there?
He was just a director.
He was
I
a
didn't know him.
You didn't know him?
I knew of him,
Right.
but I hadn't even had a chat with him except once in a blue moon. He was an active SLF peer, LSS peer.
Okay.
When he was in university and very left, but he also had moved long before me to the centre and slightly centre left.
So the people you selected, did you know them before?
Well, Lal I knew very well.
Right.
I used to go and have long chats with him and all that.
He was in the Vida, right?
He was in the wider. He was no, I knew him in Sri Lanka also.
Okay.
I used to go to their house, and Jafferjee is a lady I'm very fond of. She's still there. I go and see her once in a blue moon. I used to go and ask their advice. I used to sit at their feet literally. And Kumari was a sociologist and all that. Then with him on the economy, Ace I knew a little, and Ace was very close to Ranil. He was Secretary Industries when Ranil was Minister of Industries or some such thing. And people were telling me he's UNP. I said, I don't care what P he is. He's a very clever economist, and I'm sure he loves the country more than the UNP, and he will work for me. And he did. So that's how I took people, unlike this government, which is only taking their catchers and not taking any experts. So I had quite a few like
So
that.
who else? You had Laja Bodhana, S. Jabardana. How did Mano Tirthavella come?
Mano came in later.
Right.
I was headhunting.
You were headhunting.
He was working at the MBSL.
Right.
And somebody told me, there's a young chap who's very smart. I didn't know he's married to a cousin of mine.
Right.
I don't know 9/10 of my cousins, because my mother had loads of Ratwatte cousins. She's a Miss Ratwatte. And then I invited him to come and have a chat with me. That's what I did. And I liked him as a person. And I invited him into PERC first, when we set up PERC for the privatizations. And little by little, he came into the committee also. And I never brought in a young person who we gave some position to into the top position at once. They had to prove themselves through a fire and, hell and whatever. Because also that caused a lot of jealousy with the senior, would have caused with the seniors. Then there was Thilan Vijay Singh. Thilan also, somebody talked to me about him, and I asked him to come and see me when I was Chief Minister. And I was impressed with him and invited him to be the BOI chairman, the youngest ever. People were thought, can he do it and all that. But I used to review what was going on in the BOI every week. I had a meeting with the BOI 2-3 hours every week, and facilitated things. Land, the ministers wouldn't give land. I would ring up ministers and say, you're going home tomorrow unless you release this, things like that. And I got a lot of foreign investment going. And I suppose you know this, even with a fierce war going on, we were able to move the economy forward hugely. Our economic indicators are very good. We reduced inflation from 13% to 6% or something like that. Per capita income and growth, we had a constant growth rate of 4.5 to 5, except the 1 year that the LTT attacked the airport. 2001. But again it went back to a good figure.
So if I can, because I did some homework before this interview, one of the things that I was told was you took a very bold decision to pay some of these people who were attracted from the private sector market salaries or closer to market salaries. I mean, even today we are grappling with the same problem where government say, no, we can't pay, we are restricted by AR and FR, we cannot pay. I mean, what went through your mind? I believe you were president at 48, right? 49. How did you make such a relatively bold decision, knowing that it would create ripples?
Because I knew I had to run the government properly.
Right.
And I realized that the government had only a few really qualified people. And maybe maybe one of the people who said, madam, let's call the young Sri Lankans who have run away after 1983, the riots, and see whether they will come. So we put this on social media. At that time, there were hardly any social media, and invited people, and quite a few people came. And then, now, nobody around me, including Ace, would dare suggest a higher salary. So I talked to these people and they were getting huge salaries. I said, how much? So I said, are you willing to work for the government? Yes, maybe 1 year we'll sacrifice. I said, if you get a similar salary, will you sacrifice for longer? Then they would smile and, So I just told them we are going to give them similar salaries. And
So
all
was
of them
there-
jumped up. Even Ace was surprised. My God, you'd have strikes. I said, we'll see. I had one policy. Nobody taught me that. When I wanted to do something, I had to convince myself first. So I make my ideas, my thoughts. Then I talk with relevant people, not loads and loads, but relevant people who I think are savvy in that particular area. Then I finalize my thoughts. And then I go hell for leather, whatever opposition there may be. For example, I know you're going to ask in a little while the privatizations. Telecom, we had a lot of strikes. But I knew it was a right thing, and I had the right minister there, Mangala, and Tiran was at BOI. So I put the whole team together, ACE also, and I said we had to convince these people of the truth. So Mangala and I had various chats with them together, separately the unions, and showed them the figures as to how much they will get more than if we were just dragging along being a Tuttudeke telecom company. So then we convinced them, and finally the World Bank came in. They were very happy with the way we were doing things, and they gave us funds to take the trade union leaders to countries that had done well, like Brazil and somewhere else where they had privatized and they were doing well. So they loved the trip, of course, because they had never been abroad. And then they came and said, yes, we agree.
So coming back to the salaries, because that is the bugbear of so many administrations and governments. I mean, as you know, state capacity is very weak. And unless you're able to recruit, quality talent, especially where government does not have the skill set. Did you have any fallout from that?
From what?
From paying market salaries to these individuals? No.
Nobody dared tell me.
Nobody.
No, I must tell you, I had an iron hand. And you see, the point is, I came in after 17 years of dictatorial rule. So people were thrilled. And I rode the wave of popularity and did everything that had the difficult things immediately.
So if we can now...
And nobody would say that. And I had this habit of explaining to the people at length. I would ask the Rupavahini. At that time there were very few media. 90%, well, at least 80% of the media were in Ranil Wickremesinghe's hand. So because he comes from a media family, all UNP stations and all that. So Rupavahini was the only one. So I would ask them to come and I would start talking, 1 hour, 2 hours explaining things, and then we would say, telephone in your questions. And I believed in convincing the people.
So when your presidency was there, the Sirasa had already started, right? Maharajas had an electronic license.
Yes, Sirasa started afterwards in 97.
97, you see. But
so they got their licenses from my government.
But even the ABC, which today is controlled by Reda Silva. Hiru. But earlier
also
it was
97, 98.
During there were many licenses given during that time.
Not many. Well, radio and television.
Yeah. But the modern mass media came about, the private sector mass media.
Oh yes. With the telecom privatization.
Right. So you opened out that sector. Okay.
Very much.
So let's talk about the SOEs, because there was a peopleization drive starting from Premadasa's time, and you say that perhaps it was not done transparently. But for the benefit of some of our audience, the plantations, I think they had given management to management companies, but under your watch, it was divested to private hands. I mean, if you juxtapose that with the Land Reform Commission where you all took over the land, how did you grapple with that?
My mother took over the lands.
Right.
All our relatives got angry with us. Some of them still don't talk to me. The elite got angry with us. Even canvassed and defeated. They went to Hector Copacabana's electorate. Certain big business people from here and landowners to defeat him and things like that. So it was a difficult uphill task. Then I implemented part of it, and then to go and give back the land that we took. But I think in my case, it's not that anybody taught me to do it, but if I believe something was right at a given time, I don't think it is opportunistic, I think it is opportune. to do the right thing, not for myself, but for the country. And I came in and saw that they were not being run properly. The two state institutions that were created to run these
The
estates.
JEDB and the State Plantation Corporation.
Exactly. They were robbing, not in a big way, not like during the Rajapaksa regime, but they were robbing. The lands were sort of getting depleted and not being managed properly. And whenever somebody suggests something to me, I say, okay, come back with a paper showing me the pros and cons. The Treasury. I had this committee within the Treasury also, AAS, PB Jayasundara. PB was very good at studying. At that time, PB was good. He was a good junior. AAS is the one who introduced him to me, saying he's a nice, smart young man. So I would tell them, study this and give it. And then I would look at it and then discuss it for hours with them. And it was proved to me that if we privatize the plantations, they will be more productive and they will bring in more money to the government. And we were selling it to them, the leasers. And actually with that money, we were able to settle some of the foreign debt with the monies we got from that.
So you didn't have a problem with the divest of the plantations. Then you went on.
It had to. If there was a problem, it was a problem of conscience,
right,
and emotional. But the conscience told me that the right thing by the country was now to change my views, and which I did.
And these mental battles, do you just write it down, or how do you have these battles? How do you make up your mind? Or you debate it in your mind, or do you write it down? Or
I debate it in my mind. I dialogue a lot. Then I write down also. I get others to write and put my notes, and then take my decision.
And then, prior to Sri Lankan, it used to be called Sri Lanka. Tell us that story, how that came about. And I think there was a Richard Branson angle also, whether there was any...
he was one of the investors who came.
Okay.
Nothing much there. No, that's much easier to say because as soon as I came, probably it was Ace who told me, Madam, Sri Lanka has only 6 planes. All 6 have to be pensioned off by now, otherwise they'll start crashing. We don't have the money to buy new planes. So I said, then what do we do? He said, I don't know, we'll have to discuss it and all that. And that was one of the first privatizations I decided on. And I mean, I wasn't personally attached to it like plantations and all that, the telecom or something like that. And I looked at all the figures again and the arguments, and it was obvious that we had to privatize it. I wasn't going to sell. I was not for selling at all at that stage. And this new nice formula was evolved by my finance ministry, where we own the majority shares, and whoever who comes in owns the minority shares up to 49%. At the beginning, we gave only 42 or 43 just to see, and then we gave 49 in some instances, but 100% management rights, because I realized that the management was hopeless. It was pathetic. Public servers do not know how to manage private companies, and these are private companies. So, and then in the meantime, they also robbed, but there was nothing like the Rajapaksa era here, and there were a few spillouts. And I knew that it could earn loads of money for the government and for the country. So I said, go ahead. Then we started inviting people, first without advertising, because we realized, my economic advisory committee, we discussed that there will be a lot of strikes in Sri Lanka and they will not fly the planes. And unlike when the CEB went on strike, I put the army there and ran the CEB. You can't run an airline with the army, you had to have trained pilots. So we did it very quietly. We started asking big airlines, one-to-one. I myself did. I asked British Airways. British Airways was doing much better then. Air France, those are the ones I could. They said yes. They came and looked at it quietly. But then within the next week, a bomb goes off in Colombo, they run away. Then I said, no, you know, this thing won't work. We asked some American airlines also. I said, this won't work. Shall we try a Middle Eastern airline? At that time, Qatar and all was small. Emirates was the only big one. Because they are used to bombs and wars and all that, they may not be frightened. Actually, that was my logic. And everybody said, yes, try. So I went to Dubai on my way to somewhere or the other for some official thing. and asked to see the chairman of Emirates. Was a very nice man,
Tim Clark.
who I got to know quite well. He's retired now, as you know. And he came to the airport to see me. They booked some posh sitting area in the airport at Emirates. And we discussed this, and he also was very, very hesitant. So I kept on trying to persuade him, and you know, I sort of put the full charm act on. And finally he said, okay, we'll come to Sri Lanka and see. And then they came and saw. We had a very good presentation for them and all that. And they said, okay. So that's how it happened.
And I mean,
And there I must tell you one other thing. All these privatizations, even the port, I saw to it that not a single person was allowed to ask for bribes. There's huge possibilities of bribes because there was a lot of money going around. And I led the team, and I said, any problem, come to me straight. So they identified somebody from their side, and I said, contact me through my office. So they all say, even at that time, they said, this is the only deal that Emirates has done with any country where we didn't have to pay a bribe to somebody in the government. The port people also say that, John Keels and all of them, because I handled it myself, and it's terrified everybody, saying if anybody is found asking for bribes, you'll be hung from Goldface Green.
So in hindsight, we know what happened to Sri Lanka, which became Sri Lankan.
They offered only $17 million
Right.
for Sri Lanka. Then we argued with the team, my team with PB and Ace and who is Manu and even Rajan Brito. We took it up to $72 million. They were going on only with 70, and then they sent Emirates. I suppose they won't mind. They sent somebody to me. They know very well if they offered money, I will have him arrested. One of their people who I know, a Sri Lankan, saying, madam, we know that you will not take anything else, but the boss wanted me to tell you that we will give you any number of tickets for you and your two children for all your lives till you and your children die or whatever, free, first class, if you don't insist on the 72 million. I mean, we went up from 17 to 25 to 30, like that. I said, no. And I said, get out of my office now. He was a personal friend. Otherwise, I'll call the police. So I don't get free tickets on Emirates. I pay and go, but at least they look after me in the airport when I go. Somebody comes and meets me and takes me to the lounge. That's about the only bossy I got from it.
So it's tragic what happened thereafter, that we took it over, and that's a story for another day. Sri Lanka Telecom, you touched on it, that I believe your good friend Mangala, the late Mangala minister,
he led it.
He led it, and he convinced the unions. Even Shell Gas was under your
yes.
time. Yes.
That also, I did it myself, fighting with the cabinet also.
Right.
Some cabinet ministers were influenced by various people, by Shell, and they were fighting in the cabinet. So I handled that myself.
The other SOE that it was not divested, but you all had a significant influence in the transformation. I remember having conversations with late Mano, was People's Bank. And he used to say that it was insolvent, quite literally, that it was a negative net worth because the NPLs...
They had losses of 11 billion rupees.
At that time.
In 94, and bank cost around 12 billion.
Because
that was a lot at that time.
As a point of reference, the non-performing loans was like 21% at People's Bank. My
gosh, how much I got involved with that. Trying to pay.
Now, you all bought in a foreigner directly. XHSBC.
After advertising.
Advertising.
And interviewing and all that.
I mean, to bring in a foreigner...
World Bank helped us to interview.
Right. To bring in a foreigner for a state bank.
Bank of Ceylon also.
He was a CFO, right? Barnett.
Yes.
Yes, CFO.
Both banks had foreigners.
Foreigners. I mean, that also would have been quite bold. I mean, you would have got resistance because these have strong unions. There are banking.
Actually, I must tell you, nobody said a word to me.
Okay.
Because they knew that I was determined and there was no point in arguing. And I was convinced, if you ask me why I did that, because I have no complexes against foreigners or anybody. I have no complexes against people who are supposed to be of the opposition party if they're experts. I tell them, when you come to work for me, if you can, tell me if you can, do the job that I ask you to do. I don't ask you to do politics for me or my party. If you do it honestly for the sake of the country, I don't ask personal loyalty, tell me yes. Whether you can or not. And all of them stuck to that. So in the same way, I mean, whether it was a foreigner or not, we had no Sri Lankans who could do it at that time.
I was told that we didn't have Sri Lankans who had expertise in turnarounds. That these were insolvent and you had to turn it around.
World Bank kept insisting to me,
Right.
and IMF, because I would meet all their teams, to privatize the banks.
Okay.
And that was entirely my personal decision. I said, no, no, no. I had moved enough from, so I didn't tell them that. I'm telling you, from being a socialist economist to a free market economist, I was not going to privatize the family silver or the family gold. I said, no, we don't need to privatize the banks. Maybe the smaller ones, yes. But tell us how we should manage it better. Then every time they came, they kept saying this for many years. Then they realized, with this woman, we can't change her mind on this. Then they came with this, you know, if you have some, they didn't say foreigners, highly skilled managers to manage this, and you have good program. And the World Bank worked with us, with our experts at the Treasury and some of the bankers, and formulated a program. Complete, very comprehensive program of uplifting the two banks.
Reviving the banks.
And the foreign CFO or whoever was in charge of it.
If I can now move on to the public-private partnerships, the most landmark ones was SAGT, which was a port terminal. And I was told that there was resistance within your own government because there was a JICA loan and the Port Authority wanted to do it themselves.
That opposition was led by Mahinda Rajapaksa.
Okay.
And they had all kinds of designs on the port, as was proved later when he put his brother as the minister. Yeah, but as with everything else, I just put my foot down. You know, the one strength I had, if I can boast, is that I was educated on the economy. I had read a lot and discussed hugely all over the world, not only in Sri Lanka, with foreign experts before I came into government. And so therefore, I had the wherewithal to understand what had to be done, also with advice from my expert teams. And once I did that, I was determined I wouldn't let go. So that was one strength I had. And
so during that time, the other PPPs were in the power sector, the first thermal power plants. I think you gave the land grant and Mahapola loan to SLIIT, which is now supposed to be the largest university in Sri Lanka. There was
BOI money. We gave some money to the BOI, which gave it
to them.
That I must say was Tilan Vijay Singha's idea.
Right.
I mean, there are many ideas, Tilan's. And he said, madam, we are very backward in IT, which I knew. You know, the first, the IT was first taught in any Sri Lankan school in 1996 or 97 through my education reforms program, which was led by Tara Nimel. Even Royal College was not teaching IT as a subject. And backward India, at that time, Indian economy was much further back than ours. South India, they had been teaching IT for 20 or 25 years before us. So, and then this was going forward nicely. World Bank gave us a special vote for IT education in schools. We set up new IT rooms and, you know, equipped them and all that, trained teachers. No teachers were trained. And then it was Tilan who suggested we need IT university. So I said, well, of course we do. I hadn't thought of it. Come with a paper.
And
so that's
how it got set up. Now, the textile industry, that was also a very bold move of yours, because my family also had some interest in textile manufacturing. And I believe the export industry wanted full liberalization of fabric imports. And there was a large amount, there was a big racket going on where fabric was being bought in for these apparel factories and leaked into the domestic economy where the taxes were quite high. And in a very short period of time, you basically took all taxes, duties off textile imports. What happened there?
I just decided. Full stop. Once again, as I told you, it had to be explained to me. I told ASN people, you have to prove to me that taking these taxes off will help the textile industry and help the country to earn more. And that was not difficult to prove. And then I said,
So there would have been a lot of vested interest. The domestic manufacturers who would have protested.
There weren't very many big ones.
Right.
There were some people who were supporters of our party and other political parties who were smugglers of textiles.
Right.
But that didn't matter to me.
Because the tragedy is that Advocata, one of its main thrust areas is to reduce protectionism against some of these industries. And it's said that when foreigners come to Sri Lanka, they say your people are better dressed than what they eat. And actually clothes are quite cheap in Sri Lanka. And because of that liberalization, you have a free market operating.
And may I just say something else which is related? Sri Lankan other industries, such as Damro and others, which are primary industries, which are exporting. I mean, Damro is exporting in a big way, and so many other similar ones. I said Damro because the proprietor is from my hometown area. We liberalized the tax systems also for Sri Lankan entrepreneurs, Sri Lankan manufacturers. And C.V. Gunaratna, my dear friend, dearly lamented friend who was also killed by the LTT, he was Minister of Industries. And he came from the private sector, one of the few people who came from a high level of the private sector. And we used to have discussions once a week on industries also, because I was giving it a lot of priority. I had these discussions, reviews and all that regularly. No other leader has done that. And that was very good. So CV came up with the idea, we can't be giving BOI facilities to only foreign companies. Why don't we give it to ours? I said, yes, so come up with a paper. So then they came up with this, liberalizing taxation, giving them incentives. I think low interest loans also from the state banks, and they came up like anything. And a lot of those people still say it's only because of facilities, financial facilities you gave us that we are here today.
So as I was saying, one of Advocata's thrust areas is more about open trade, free trade. And it was under your government that the Sri Lanka-India Free Trade Agreement, the initial agreement was signed. There is an antipathy towards India even at that time.
Very big.
Very.
At that time, the JVP was saying killing people just a little before that who bought Indian goods. Shop owners who sold Indian goods were being killed when they were killing loads of young people. That was an order given by the leadership. So that remained a little bit, yes.
So you nevertheless went ahead. I mean, your advisors would have been advising against this, right? That Sri Lanka,
no,
they were for it.
My expert committee was very much for it, except one, PBJ. All the others very much for it. Actually, I must tell you, giving credit, I never take credit where it's not due to me, but obviously I understood what they were saying and I had the courage to go through with it. It was Lal's idea, entirely Lal Jayawardena's baby. Even AS had doubts, because AS was close to Sri Lankan industrialists and all that, and entrepreneurs, whether it will affect our businesses. This Lal was fully convinced, and Lal led the whole thing. And Lal was a university colleague of Manmohan Singh, Cambridge King's College. So he said, shall I go to, he was my advisor. I had only a very few advisors. Lal was the only economic advisor. Others were officials, so they were in the advisory committee. I said, yes, go. And he went and met, obviously he would have had easy access to the Prime Minister, Manmohan Singh. And he talked to him. At that time, it was Narasimha Rao. Manmohan was his finance minister or finance advisor, economic advisor. And he convinced Manmohan, who was able to convince the government. The bigger opposition we had, huge opposition from the Indian bureaucracy. They didn't allow the Indian government to sign one single FTA with any country. You know that this was the first FTA India signed with anybody.
I was not aware of that. Right.
So it was Lal and my charm working, and Manmohan was very fond of me, and so was Narasimha Rao. Oh, that young lady, and all that he used to say, it seems. So I used to go and charm them a bit, and they said, yes, now let's look at it. So my God, the officials committees, they kept on dragging it, and Lal was not he was a top intellectual, but he was not a schemer, so he didn't know how to handle this. Then I put in others into the committee. I can't remember who was in it even. And finally we managed to bring it to some point. And then they said, unless you come, the final bit is not going to be resolved. So I remember I went one Christmas, because at Christmas time everything sort of half shuts down in government also, and sat down, and we were discussing till 2, 3 in the morning with the officials committee and the finance minister. At that time, Manmohan was prime minister, I think, or he was finance minister, one or the other. So even the ministers would retire, and I was sitting there till 2 o'clock in the morning with my team and their team, discussing for 3 days. And finally I said, no, this won't do. They used to agree to about some small percent of what we are suggesting and not say the other things. I said, let's go, I'm leaving tomorrow morning. Then they got worried. Not the officials, but the government, because we had very good relations at the time, and they had bad relations with the
other neighbors.
So, and also strangely, I used a lot of these things because I have the knowledge or the brains or whatever to use whatever.
The fact that your family was close to the Nehru family, did it help?
Oh, hugely. Well, it was a Congress party in power, massively. And whenever I went, Mrs. Sonia Gandhi was the sort of power behind the throne. I always called on her, and she would hug me and all this, and we had a nice long chat, exchange of nice gifts and all that. So she would, tell them, do whatever you can.
So that's the behind the scenes story of this Sri Lanka.
Finally, I threatened to leave.
Right.
And then they said no. Then the Prime Minister came in and said, no, we can't do that. Just agree to it. So they agreed.
And that's how it came about.
And the Sri Lankan business people were also protesting, not in a violent, aggressive way, but we are going to lose this and that. And AS used to go and explain to them. And I think Masvid Betiran also. And PB to some extent at that time he was convinced. And we sort of half convinced them. But once he started working, they were very happy about it.
One utterance of yours that I distinctly remember is you saying that Sri Lankan businessmen, some of the businessmen are Tuttudeka businessmen. Why did you say that?
No, because they were crooks. They were not honest. They used to bribe everybody to get their Tuttudeka businessmen, meaning they were not skilled business people.
You mean they were rent seekers? They were crony capitalists?
Crony capitalists, and corrupting the whole system. I mean, they would try to get whatever they wanted through corruption, and thereby corrupting the government systems also. And also another factor, when I said Tuttudeka, is that they were not skilled business people.
A lot
of them are not educated. I will say this even now. Now the younger people are different. During my time 30 years ago, a vast majority of the business people, I will tell you the names later, off the screen, they wouldn't even read a book. Most of them didn't even have their O-levels. At best, the O-level.
One sector that you have commented previously, I remember in 1996, 3 days we had power cuts, and you always said there's a power mafia. Would some of those businessmen be in that power mafia?
Only one or two.
Okay.
Because they would sort of engineer a power cut at times.
It's always alleged that they let the water out.
I don't think that is true.
That's not true.
I don't think.
Right.
No, it was that they would wait for the droughts.
Right.
And then when we had to start the power cuts, they would bring their generators and sell them at huge prices to the CEB, give massive bribes to the CEB engineers. They are the richest public servants in this country. And the government was obliged to take their generators. And they even bribed my ministers latterly.
So another interesting person.
There were, during my time, only two.
Two. Okay. Another interesting individual that you mentioned, P.B. Jayasundara, who then went on to be the undisputed economic czar, certainly under Mahinda Rajapaksa and Gotabaya Rajapaksa's government. But PBJ, better known as PBJ, actually came into the scene under your government.
I brought him in.
Right. Well, how did it happen?
In the same way, I brought in a lot of young people.
Right.
To run the government or to help run the government. He was introduced to me by AS. He was a young officer in the young buck in the central bank. He was central banker. And few times I would have 2 sessions with the treasury officials every week. Progress reviews, problem solving and all that. And AS while managing the war and the peace discussions also. So AS suddenly started bringing this young man, small made person without, he wasn't a striking personality. So he would just sit there, not talking. And after about the 3rd time, I said, right now, PB, you can go. And I told AS, please wait a minute. And I said, who is this person that you keep bringing? I said, no, he's a very talented young man. We have to build him up. And I'm going to bring more people also like that. I said, very good if you are building them up. That's how it happened. And I must say at that time, PB also must have been a socialist at university. He did what we told him to do very well.
Because you put him in charge of PERC, right? Or was
much later?
Later. Right.
No, PERC chairman was Rajan Asirvadam.
Right.
At the beginning, Rajan Asirvadam, who passed away recently, I appointed him the chairman of the Bank of Ceylon. The first Tamil person to lead a major bank in Sri Lanka. And then while he was there, I put him in charge of PERC also and brought in Rajan Brito from England. He would come for 1 week every month while he was doing his job there.
You knew him from the UK?
Who?
Rajan Brito.
From Rosemead Place when we were kids.
Okay.
They lived down Rosemead Place and his mother and my mother was classmates.
Right.
So I knew him well, but I knew he was talented.
Right.
Never, ever, during my 11 years in government, have I, actually 12 and a half, if you count the chief minister part also, have I brought in somebody known to me if they didn't have the relevant skills. I mean, though Rajan was a very dear friend, I wouldn't have invited him in if he didn't have the skills. At that time, we were very short of skills, and even AS was very happy with him, and AS interviewed him and all that. And he was actually doing it more like a favor. We were hardly paying him. He wasn't getting these huge salaries till he came to PERC. So the 2 of them ran PERC actually. And so, Mano came in later.
So PBJ, he comes in as the DST, right? He comes into your Ministry of Finance as the Deputy Secretary Treasury.
No, he was just a junior officer in the Treasury.
Right.
From Central Bank, we seconded him to the Finance Ministry, while AS was the secretary. Like his Golia,
right? Because
he trusted him to do confidential things. He was very, very trustworthy in that sense. He wouldn't tell anybody anything secret, even they threatened him with death. And then little by little, AS went back to the central bank, and I think his dream was to become the governor, and we made him the governor. And there was a lot of hiccups with GL Piris, who was my deputy minister. So he wanted to leave. Then I brought in senior public servants. I wanted people who were economists. There were very few in the public service. I brought in one who was about to retire from another ministry, and I had to ask him to leave within 1 year because I found he was corrupt. He was being corrupted by a big firm. But I don't announce because I think it's not fair by their families. So just go. Tomorrow morning I want your letter of resignation. He did. And I didn't drag him off to the courts or something like that. And then I was desperate. Then I had various people acting. And then I had to choose someone, and PB was very talented. Took him, and then little by little he changed.
He's a very different person.
With power, a lot of people change with power.
You touched on corruption. I mean, every taker has a giver. I mean, you've been the president for 11 years. And when you reflect on what has happened with corruption thereafter, and that has become the most important issue
that
What's
has,
your reflections
that
on
has chased away presidents and brought in new governments, the issue of corruption.
So when you reflect on this quite literal cancer in our society, what's your reflections on corruption? Why is it that Sri Lanka became so corrupt?
So corrupt.
Is it that the tone is set at the top?
Is it?
Is it that the tone has to be set at the top?
Oh yes, that's one of the major factors. We were not at all, I mean, if you look at India, doesn't matter saying it, India was 1,000 times more corrupt than us. And we really became impossibly corrupt. You please don't cut this out because people know this, under the Rajapaksa regimes. I mean, that is why there were Aragalayas, and for the first time ever, presidents were chased out of power. They had to climb the back wall and run away in helicopters and all that. So we had corruption, but to some extent only. Then I came in and controlled it a lot, with various policies and practices. But you asked a fundamental question: why? I think,
does the electoral system that requires a lot of money to be in politics create perverse
some people
incentives for
say
corruption?
this. It's a very shallow logic. I think. I mean, look at all the third world countries, Murtaza, they are all corrupt. Africa, impossibly corrupt. Latin America, impossibly corrupt. So, and Sri Lanka was one that was a shining example in that whole caboodle, that we were very little corrupt. Corruption really began during Jayajawardhan's time, where he said, let the robber barons come and open the gates. And I think one of the major wrongs he did to our economy and our society and our governance, is bringing in the free market economy with no holds barred. In a country where we were used to controlled economy from the time of the kings. The economy was in the hands of the kings. And then the colonials did the same thing. I mean, they controlled the economy. Then the various Sri Lankan governments came in, they controlled the economy. Suddenly, when you open up after 2,000 odd years, there had to be, it couldn't be done in the same way as England or France or America did it. One should have thought much more creatively and opened up, not only slowly, but opened up in a more creative, different fashion. You just suddenly go and open the floodgates. A floodgate comes in and, my God, salli thiyena apita horakam karanna puluwan, posat wenna puluwan, and they start. So then I came in and we controlled it to some extent, bringing in lots of systems and procedures, discipline, and the iron will and the iron hand of the president. Without that, you can't do it. So, and being convinced, and the president had to be 100% honest. So but I think one of the reasons I told, the major reason is that we opened up like that. But the whole of the third world, the poor countries are corrupt. We managed to keep it under control, but then when leaders who had absolutely no qualms and no conscience and no principles took over the governments, the floodgates opened again.
One of the unfinished...
And I think, because this is one of my special things, so I could go on and on, but very briefly, if you look at the condition of corruption now, the government is doing something very good, which is arresting the former corrupt people, but they haven't still brought in the systems and procedures required. The only way to control, I'm telling you through a lot of experience, is to, of course, have the vision of the leaders, not only one leader, and the government, no corruption, and this is how we are going to rule the country. Then you have to have the rules and regulations, all of which are in place, most of it brought under my government. Then you have to have the institutions to implement those rules and regulations. And then you have to have systems and procedures of government to prevent people from going into corrupt practice, like attenders. For the first time in Sri Lankan history, we formulated a thing called the tender procedures document. And I, as president, sent it with my own instructions to all the secretaries, saying, hereafter, every single tender of government, except up to 5 million rupees or something, beyond 5 million, has to follow these procedures and nothing else. If it doesn't, you will be dealt with. And they did. I mean, it took a little time. I had to keep ringing up secretary. I heard that you are not sticking by the tender procedure. Things like that. And it worked very well, but then Rajapaksa came and threw it straight out of the window. And you know, afterwards, when the Yahapalana government came after 9 years of Rajapaksa regime, I couldn't find that document in the finance ministry. And I had to get it from the man who, the DST, who sat with me, and he and I did this, Daliyanage. He had a copy at home, and then I photocopied it and gave it to various people and all that, civil society people. So I think the way to go for corruption is that this government hasn't still got that part right. The regulations, they don't have to do anything. All that we had brought in is there. The same institutions have to be studied, and they have to either update them or have new things in that same manner at different points to have institutions to control it. Then the systems and procedures. The leaders seem to be honest, so that factor is looked after. I think corruption in the third world, in poor countries, when people get power, you just cannot control, and when they have examples of other people doing it, they think, why can't we do it? So it's all over the world.
The last point I wanted to touch on was one of your unfinished projects, which was a new constitution. I have
How long have you
attended,
taken? About 2 hours?
maybe a bit less than that. On an economic governance side, was there anything specific in that constitution that would have improved economic governance?
The only thing I sat with that constitution for months and hours and I don't know what, years. That constitution, by the way, in one sentence, was drafted. The draft of it was done before we came into power. I brought in GLPDC into the system, and I think GL's main asset is his excellent legal thinker. And I said, GL, before you come into my government, you will have to draft the constitution. And these are the main things I want: abolition of the executive presidency, resolution of the ethnic problem, and of course, transparency in government. And he had got together a whole lot of intellectuals and all that. He had been vice chancellor of the Colombo University at the time, and drafted this. I studied it before the elections, took certain bits of it. People wouldn't have understood the whole thing, and we put it into our manifesto. And then as soon as I came into government, we started discussing it. So to put a long story short, the first draft was finalized, and I started discussing it with the political parties, where we had only one vote extra in parliament. Otherwise, I wouldn't have asked them even when I gone through. I had started discussions with the parties on the 3rd of August, 1995, 1 year after we came in. I had already discussed with the Tamil and Muslim parties. There were 9 Tamil parties at the time in parliament, and one Muslim party, which was Ashraf's, which then split up. Ashraf was in government and fully supportive of what I was doing, and he was in my constitutional committee also, constitution drafting committee, very able gentleman. And Neelan Tirucharam was in the constitution drafting committee, GL and a few others. And I started discussing with the UNP on the 3rd of August 95. And all that they did, Ranil Wickramasinghe, I'm sorry to say, was filibuster. I'll see, we'll study it and let you know. And that went on forever. And finally, lots of other things happened. So economy, there were no specific sections on the economy. I think you must have studied it. Its main point.
But the executive presidency was going to be disbanded.
Oh, definitely. There's one whole chapter on it.
Was there anything about the civil service?
Yes.
The independence, to restore the independence of the civil
commissions.
Commissions, right.
The 5 independent commissions was in that.
Right.
And 5 or 4, at that time it was 4 or something. And the resolution of the ethnic problem by giving all communities, religious and ethnic communities and others, caste or whatever, equal rights. And of course, good governance was very importantly in it. So unfortunately, and the economy would have benefited by, if I can think now that I didn't expect this question, by 2 things. One was the stabilization of democracy and democratic decisions taken about the economy without decisions being taken on the basis of corruption or something, on 1 or 2 men or women's will as they wanted. Then the other way it would have been benefited is that the excessive power of the executive presidency was going to be abolished. I mean, the presidency itself was going to be abolished. We were only going to have a nominal president, and all political powers going back to parliament and the prime minister. So hopefully if it worked properly, the system would have been more democratic. The president couldn't decide on things by himself as he can now, and parliament should have debated and discussed and dialogued. So the economy would have benefited by that.
So, with the benefit of hindsight and experience, being a two-time executive presidency, you're convinced that the executive presidency should be done away with.
Oh, definitely.
It's
Quite definitely.
It's because there's too much of power in the hands of one person. Right.
And it has been abused. Right. Probably I'm the only one who didn't. And I must say Ranil also didn't. In that short time he was there.
Finally, if you think back, what would you have done differently? Anything?
You mean as a political leader? If you ask me in my private life, I will refuse to answer it.
Right.
That's a difficult question to answer. I have thought about this myself. Since I got out of the presidency.
Some of these economic reforms, would you have accelerated it further?
Given that situation, it wouldn't have been possible.
Not possible.
Don't forget, we were doing a vicious war.
Yeah.
A vicious war. And all the time my cabinet and my officials and advisors would say, Madam, you are doing a war. You can't get the people against you doing these things. And I took the risk and we did all these things that we discussed. So we couldn't have gone any further. And I have asked myself this through many painful hours. I can't think where we could have done better given the circumstances. Where we could have gone faster or something like that. The only thing I regret is that the leader of the opposition at that time, there was a very strong opposition in the UNP, that I couldn't get around him to do what was required for the good of the country. What I should have done, I don't know.
And finally, to the young audience, do you think that the more capable, the more aspirational, the more visionary people should come into politics?
My God, yes. I'm spending my time the last about 5 or 6 years doing that.
And they can make change? You can change the course of a country?
I think so. If we can't, then you might as well write off Sri Lanka and put a board close for business and just go to sleep. The last chance we have is a new group, new movement, a new force of younger people coming in, but not just young, age is not the issue. Skilled, educated, skilled, ethical.
So on that note, President Chandrika Bandaranaike, it has been a fascinating conversation and all the best to you.
Thank you. I was very happy discussing with you and it was very interesting, and thank you too.